Well, I'm sitting on the beach at Hastings, the sort of far end of the beach. You can see these rocks and stuff above me. When I was very small, actually it's one of my early memories is my father and mother took me to the castle, which is a little bit further along, and obviously it's just a ruin now, but it was one of the early Norman castles that were built after William's invasion. And obviously the Battle of Hastings, although it's not in Hastings, is just up the road in the aptly named Battle, and there's an abbey there. I did a podcast a little while ago when I was walking the pilgrimage trail that takes that goes all the way from Southampton up to Canterbury and goes through that part of Sussex. Yeah, it's a lovely day here, and obviously Hastings has got a little bit of a series of memories for me and a lot of people, and also of course it's a very historic place in the UK, and it was shelled a lot in the Second World War, and I think also in the First World War, because it can either be bombed or attacked with, I don't know, there was a gun I think the Germans had called Big Bertha that they used, but this place was called Hellfire Corner. So yeah, interesting little spot. But the reason I'm walking here today is I'm sort of catching up with a lot of places from my past. And obviously I would occasionally return to Hastings, and probably still will, even though I'm sort of moving away from the area, because it's one of those places that's got a real resonance for a lot of people, almost from a point of view of historically has a resonance. It was obviously the lands of the Godwinsons, and obviously King Harold was a Godwinson, and that was part of the reason the battle was fought here, because the Normans were provoking Harold to fight, because obviously as an invasion army they had a lot of problems getting provisions, and interestingly the complexity of doing an invasion either of the UK or us invading France was complicated because of getting enough food and resources and material for an army. So somewhere like Hastings would have been a good sort of stop-off point. It's not sure if it's the narrowest point, with Calais and maybe Newhaven. I don't know, it might be the narrowest point. I don't know, it's difficult to say. But it means that, if you want to look at this from for the sake of argument, say a feng shui point of view, certain places have real energy about them, power about them, because of where they're positioned. And this is interesting because Hastings is obviously got an extraordinary amount of old buildings, but at the moment it hasn't been gentrified. So when you walk around Hastings, which is what I've just been doing this morning, you see a lot of people that, to be quite honest, could be a pirate, you know, and there's certainly some interesting old families here. Fairly sort of rough and tumble sort of characters. And I would say that there are more male earrings per head of capita here than probably anywhere else, apart from maybe Penzance. So you've got some quirky sort of characters, but the interesting thing, of course, that makes it possible for lots of artists to live here at the moment, because there are places that are affordable, although that is changing a lot. So what I'm sort of interested in sort of talking about today is this thing of the arts, the artists being short of money, places like this, and originally it would have been places like Bristol, the Isle of Dogs at one point in London, which is now obviously incredibly expensive to live in. But you get this pattern where a place is run down, the artistic people move in, it becomes trendy, and then the yuppies move in, the prices go up, the artists can't afford to stay there, they find somewhere new, the place is then developed, the money moves in. I did a little podcast from Whitstable about a month ago, and that certainly happened there. So you get this sort of cycle of events that happen, driven by artists, or should I say driven by poverty, and then driven by artists, and then driven by what's trendy. It's getting a bit windy here. I hope this doesn't affect the sound, but this is part of that sort of cycle. Now I'm beginning to write another book based on the sort of, the aim of it is to help artists and musicians who are starting out. It's sort of a very sort of street cred survival guide, and things are changing very rapidly, obviously because of AI and computers, just generally what you can do as an artist. It's not so much the, you know, owning an electric guitar and doing gigs. There's lots of places that you can play in Hastings, and you know, lots of places that run down. There are places to play and perform, do DJing and all the rest of it. But it is that sort of, there's a mentality to this, and that is this sort of very make do and mend attitude. You know, that sort of pirate's mentality of finding things, in inverted commas, and making use of them. And that sort of, you know, sort of a punk ethic. And I still think that's relevant. I still think that, although colleges and universities and stuff may be great for the knowledge-based stuff, but I think it's actually the thing that makes an artist great is none of that. It's an ability to see the world in another way, and a way to connect with people that's maybe very left field. And I don't think that happens very easily in an academic environment. because that's predicated on what's come before and what people know is the norm. And really good art comes from somewhere that's not the norm. It's a way of subverting the norm. So places like seaside places that would have been involved in smuggling and piracy has got that sort of vibe about it. It still has, weirdly. It's getting quite windy now, so it's sort of probably going to disturb the sound, but it's all part of the vibe. What we've got when we look out over the sea from here is another place, you know, France basically. But people who lived on this island would have thought of that as being a very rich place, rich for pickings, but also full of menacing people. This is one of the sink ports to one of the number of ports that were used to defend England from the French. I think it was Edward I set this up. He obviously built a lot of castles, I know that. But there's this sort of uneasy alliance with the continent as being a place that we were suspicious of, but also we liked to be able to have contacts with it because we could smuggle stuff in. And to be honest, that's still an issue. Whether that's people smuggling immigrants in, and our suspicion of the French is still the same, and just suspicion of people that don't, you know, what we would say belong here. But you know, if you look at a lot of the characters who walk the streets in Hastings and anywhere else, they're a bunch of mongrels, like we all are in the UK, which makes it rather ridiculous, but there we go. But that environment, I think, breeds a particular type of creative thinking. And there are lots of places here that are based on very unusual ways of thinking art. There's lots of artistic shops here that are very rough and ready, along with a few antique shops. Lots of very punky, hippie, gothy shops selling to the customers. So there's obviously a demand for that stuff here. And it's always been the case ever since, you know, I can remember. In the 70s, it was definitely a very vibrant place musically. So there's something in that. There's something in the sort of ghosts of the past that haunt a place. Something that, as I said, you know, the Chinese would have thought of as being an energy centre. And that sort of slightly dark, ghost-ridden places, and there are plenty of places around here that are haunted. By the type of attitudes of people who lived here and survived here, living close to the sea. Anyway, catch up soon, and speak to you on my next travel.